Healthcare is under more pressure than ever. Cyber attacks are increasing, legacy systems are straining under the weight of the modern demand, and the regulatory landscape keeps shifting. At the same time, organizations are being asked to do more faster with less disruption without putting patient safety or data at risk. Today, I'm sitting down with two companies who are working on exactly that problem from two different but deeply connected angles. Sublimation Health helps hospitals and health systems move off rigid legacy infrastructure into secure cloud native environments without the turbulence that usually comes with that kind of change. ComplyAssistant has spent 25 years helping healthcare organizations build and maintain compliance and cybersecurity programs that keep them protected, prepared, and audit ready. Together, they cover the full picture, the infrastructure, the security, and the governance that holds it all together. Let's get into it. Welcome, Peter. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself today.
So, Peter DiNocenzo, I work for Sublimation Health. I'm chief of staff, and I take care of everything from managed services to interview and hiring. So I'm a back-end person that supports the people on the front lines, and I'm having a good time doing it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Peter. Gerry, welcome.
Hi, Brooke. Gerry Blass. I'm CEO of ComplyAssistant. Like you said, 25 years now. The company has been around, and we started right before HIPAA. And the interesting thing there was somebody asked me, what are you going to do after HIPAA? Okay. And that's 25 years ago. So HIPAA's now coming out with a big update this year. It's not going away. Yeah, I don't have to worry about what happens after HIPAA. So anyway, thank you for having us today.
Absolutely. We're going to jump right in. I've got some questions for you guys. So I think Peter's going to take the lead, and then Gerry, feel free to pop in and give us your views on each of these questions as we go through. So question number one, everybody wants to know, what are the biggest challenges that healthcare leaders are facing today when trying to balance security, compliance, modernization, and patient care?
So working through and working with the customers in the hospitals, I mean, some of the biggest impacts and challenges we see are definitely the aging infrastructure and the cyber threats that are growing inside the healthcare industry. Like years ago, when they would have cyber threats, they left healthcare alone, right? It was like sort of the unspoken rule that you don't bother hospitals, right? But now that's no longer the case, and cyber threats are a real challenge inside of hospitals currently today. So I would say, I mean, if I had to pick two, I mean, there's a bunch, but I would say aging infrastructure and cyber threats. Like if you looked at infrastructure today, right? So in January, a lot of people's 2016 servers are coming out of warranty. Right. So what are they going to do? Because if they didn't order them yet, they're not getting them before January. Right. There's roughly a 40 to 45 week lead time to get servers. Right. Between Dell and everybody else. Like it's a very long lead time. So, how do you combat that? Well, I mean, our answer for modernization is always cloud. Right. That's what we do here at Sublimation Health. We do healthcare modernization, and we take your on-site data center and Epic, and we host it into AWS or Azure, and that's what we do. So that would be my answer for that question, aging infrastructure and cyber threats.
Gerry?
Yeah. So interesting that if a hospital health system provider does a great job with controls to try to reduce the risk of actually experiencing an attack or something to do with AI risk, the problem also comes into play where the stuff that's outside of their control, for the most part, is third-party vendors and also internal employees who might click on an email, right? So they could do everything in the world and somewhat look perfect on paper. All it takes is one click, and all it takes is one vendor. And if you have any questions about that, look at Change Healthcare. That impacted across the nation, providers of all sizes. Nobody's under the radar. Anybody can be brought down, something like that. Hospitals have to vet their vendors, but no matter how much you do, the vendor could still cause a big problem. And so, There were small pharmacies that had to go out of business due to that event, that incident. And the total number of patient information records that were breached was 130 million. I mean, just unbelievable. So that's, besides what Peter said, which is all within the four walls, is also outside of, well, the employees are inside, but the vendors on the outside are a big threat and vulnerability.
Well, thanks guys for that. Now are you ready to jump into question 2? Because we're going to talk about why it's important. So why is it important that compliance, security, infrastructure, and disaster recovery teams are working towards the same goal?
Well, it's because sometimes the struggle is people silo themselves along with departments, right? So you'll have departments you'll have IT over here, you'll have nursing over here, you'll have clinical, you'll have surgery. Like it's all one ecosystem. And it's, if you wanted to look at it as something as simple as a hand, right? So like without the palm, you don't have the fingers. Without the fingers, you can't hold the cup, right? It's one ecosystem that they all have shared objectives. So although, and one of the biggest shared objective they all have is patient care, right? We're all in this. I mean, and we'll get into it later. Like our founder of this company started it because he wanted to improve patient care because he was in the hospitals for 25 years and he saw the struggles and the problems with people showing up for things that weren't ready for them because they didn't know, the hospital didn't know things or they weren't prepared. And he literally got in this business to change healthcare. And he has that one ecosystem approach, right? And well, because he has it, everybody has it here, right? So I mean, that's, you all take the path of the leader. And it's one ecosystem that everyone needs to support everybody else. So that's my biggest thing, and we do a great job at communicating that when we start to get involved with clients.
Gerry?
Right. So excellent comments, Peter. And I'll go back to an example 20 years ago where a client, to remain nameless, obviously, put together a disaster recovery plan for the first time. The problem was that the plan was not compliant with reality of operations. So there were certain things they needed on the network for it to work. It just was never going to work. It was never tabletopped. The leaders didn't know. They just know the plan was done. It's in a nice shiny binder that says disaster recovery plan. They're happy, right? Meanwhile, it was really not operational at all if it happened. Today, what we see is a big emphasis on governance because you have to have representation across the board, across the enterprise. The leaders have to be part of it. They have to be aware of reality, aware of where there are vulnerabilities, aware of costs to fix those vulnerabilities, and then make decisions that are smart, prioritizing the risk to reduce it. So that's the key, and that is really what's needed, and what's great about our two companies, ComplyAssistant and Sublimation Health, is that just that subject alone, that disaster plan and business continuity plan, comes together. We could talk about that maybe in more detail later on, but it does really come together between our two companies as to how to have a full end-to-end solution there.
So talking about an end-to-end solution, when one of these areas is overlooked, what do you guys see happening when the hand doesn't have all its fingers?
So how do you say this, Knight? So it's organizational chaos in a structured environment, or an environment you would hope that would be structured, right? When the fire happens, right, you have a bunch of people that are used to operating in a certain way. When you add the mix of a security cyber attack or threat, people don't think rationally, right? Because it's a different approach. And the whole hair on fire, right? Everybody's just running around looking to do things. If that plan isn't solid and the technology isn't solid behind the plan, then you're going to have an issue. An outage now is roughly $700,000 a day. And if you like, and never mind the loss of services and the patients that suffer through this, right? If their systems are down, how do they know who gets what medicine and how much medicine to dispense, right? They don't have that anymore, right? So you have to pressure test your system, and you need to make the adjustments to continue to pressure test that system, right? And having the proper technology in place is step one. You have to have that, but you have to have, going back to the cohesiveness and the hand, everybody's got to be working together to make sure everything's always up to date, that the infrastructure has the information it needs to support and run during events like that.
Right.
Gerry?
Yeah. And so going back to what we were talking about before, which is the downtime, and again, Change Healthcare, but others, when it becomes extended downtime, the impact is geometric. A 3-day downtime is what folks used to plan for in a plan. 3 days, could be weeks, it could be months now, and that's happened. When that happens, the impact is patients being sent to other facilities. Departments shut down, electives shut down. Who knows what's happening in the ICU with medical devices and medical devices overall, like dialysis and chemo equipment. So, we belong to HSCC, which is the Health Sector Cybersecurity Council, and they say, and their motto is that cybersecurity is patient safety and lives. And so the more the impact, and we're just talking about on the clinical side, there's also the financial impact of not being able to bill because you have to only bill electronically. The insurance companies do not accept manual billing. So now there's no cash flow coming in. So what do you do there? Also, are you prepared to pay a ransomware to get back up? So all these things are reality. They've happened with big stories. And so what's the other side of the coin is to have controls in place that could reduce that risk. And one of the main controls are provided by Sublimation Health, and Peter can talk more about that. But it reduces the risk of a really extended downtime, and also almost it could actually be no downtime, as opposed to 3 months. It could be none. That's how big it is.
Right. So what Gerry's alluding to here is we build out isolated recovery environments for Epic in the cloud. And currently right now, I guess of all the IREs that are running in cloud, we've built out about 35% of them. Right. So we have this down to a flow process for sure. But let me explain a little bit about what IRE is. So you have your EHR running, and you have a cyber attack or any kind of unplanned downtime. You would be able to start this environment up in literally, I would say, every time we do an activation, because we provide managed services for our environments. So for an IRE environment to get spun up, we're talking about 10 minutes. And you'll have a full EHR in 10 minutes that, depending on how far you want to take it, it could just be an EHR that you could get in and work in, or it could be a limited read write. So we have Harbor, where it could be a limited read write. You could write to it like you were writing to it on-prem during a regular day. So depending on how far you want to take that, there's a bunch of different options, but it's a 10-minute activation. From, I would say, by the time you contact us and we get it up, I mean, I would say 10 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. Now, in the work that you guys have been doing in the healthcare organizations, when someone comes to you or when they start thinking about using your services, what does their current environment look like? We like stories here. And so, of course, please don't use any names because that's just not a thing.
Right.
But we like stories because we also understand that everybody is busy. They have budget constraints, they have all of the constraints, and we know that they have to think about these things. But what is it? What is the last straw that you've seen with clients that you're working with or have worked with in the past? What is the last straw that just puts them into that headspace to start working with you?
So a lot of the times that people start to reach out, the more that these breaches at hospitals and ransomware attacks take place, and then they start to hear about them. So that always, I was on a call with someone. This was, I would say, 2 years ago, and I'll never forget it because it was a line that stuck with me. And we were telling him about, the different services and how we could help and, all that stuff that you do on calls. And he said, listen, I don't really care. I don't want to be X and X hospital that happened to have been in the news for a ransomware attack. And it was like on day 27. Right. So, I mean,
Mm.
I'm sure if you wanted to look it up, you could probably find that hospital. But
Mhm.
like that was his answer. I don't really care. I don't want to be this hospital. What do I have to do to not be? So that's a lot of it has to do with headlines. And it's you got to take your hat off to people, because especially in those positions, because look, everybody at the end of the day is trying to feed a family. So to sit back and analyze your environment and say, okay, look, we have a problem, that could be taken a lot of different ways when you go to your board, right? Because your board could sit back and say, well, you got the problem, you let it get like that. We don't, like it's there's a lot of different levels in which you can take that statement when you go to your board and say, hey, I need, X amount to continue to build out our DR or disaster recovery process and plan. So it's but if you ask, back to your original question, is what's the catalyst? I would say like the internet and the news, right? Because nobody wants to be in it, and a lot of people react to the other environments that are getting hacked and held for ransom.
That's valid. Gerry?
Yeah, so ComplyAssistant is about GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance. All three are very important components of trying to reduce risk, right? That's the R. Having awareness, that's the G. And then compliance is evidence of due diligence as opposed to negligence. Change management is also a big part of this, because a snapshot of an organization on any given time, after a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever, it could be totally different. So it has to be periodic. It has to be ongoing. And so what we do is, we meet with our clients and we do periodic assessments and audits, um, and that's what makes the wheel go around. And then it depends on how, when you say how budget and resource constrained are they? Can they actually address some of this stuff? Is it some of it not attainable and they have to comment why? Um, Even in relation to insurance, cyber insurance, let's say as an example, if they can show evidence of due diligence to companies by attestation, the premiums are going to be lower, even that standpoint, from an insurance company. So there's a lot of positives of really trying to attain good levels of GRC, and there's also a lot of problems if they don't. Now, I'll just tell you one example. I'm doing a walkthrough of a client that we had for about 5 years, and they had a new ED, emergency department, brand new, state of the art, everything spanking clean and beautiful, and glitter in the ED. So I'm walking through there, and they have all these big monitors that have patient tracking, and that's for the physicians in the ED to know where their patients are. Well, there was a woman's information on that tracker that said her name, first name, last name, her age, her admission complaint, and her admit diagnosis. And it was not a pretty diagnosis. Okay. Now, if I'm the CEO, do I want my wife to be in that ED? If I'm an employee, do I want to be in that ED? And why is it like that? And they said, and I was walking with the privacy and security officer through the ED when this happened, because we do walkthroughs just to see physical security. And I was shocked. And I said, is this like being punked? Am I being punked right now? Was this a setup? Because how could this be like this? And they go, well, the physicians have a lot of power here. They demanded it. We couldn't override it. Too political. We need you to write a letter. Write it up. So I wrote it up, and like a week later it was fixed. And I said, you're trying to tell me that my write-up is what made this thing change? That's crazy. What if I didn't come in for another year? You know? So that's real world of what you can see that is like mind-boggling. But we all live in the real world. We don't live in the perfect world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We definitely do not live in the perfect
Yeah.
world. When we're talking about successes that you've had, let's tell me a story. After clients start working with you, and we just talked about the initial and what happened at the beginning, and Gerry, you alluded to some of the success with the changing of the board, but tell me about success after working with your individual companies.
So I could give you a great example. I mean, if you're talking about success, and this is a hard one to measure, but this was a direct impact on what some people didn't experience that some other people at other places did. And the people that didn't experience it because they were prepared never really felt the impact of it, but there is a significant impact. So if you sit back and think it was June or July of 2024 when CrowdStrike went down, right? Everything was put, the whole country was at a halt. You couldn't fly anywhere. Hospital systems went down. Like it was virtually a stop. And with our system being up in AWS, it was probably about 33. It was under 40 minutes, and we were back up and running. Right. So, and you have to realize, like, it's I know 40 minutes sounds like a long time, but there are people down for days, right, during that incident, and we had, by the time you get the right people on the phone and things like that, there's a little time that takes that. So I don't want to send the impression out there that, oh, you go down and we're on cloud, you're up in 3 minutes. That's not fair. Right. So, but you are back in a whole lot less time than everybody else was, so it was 40 minutes, and they didn't experience anything over the next 2 to 3 days that everybody else did. So they
Mm.
didn't understand what everybody else was experiencing, and I understand that. But that was an eye opener that day, because we also had people traveling, and we were supposed to do something for a hospital on a Monday, couldn't get there till Wednesday, and he was scheduled to fly out on a Sunday. So it was literally 4 days behind, and that was a serious event. I mean, it affected everything, credit card, I mean, from beginning to end. And the only people who suffered were patients, right? Because they're not getting the services that they needed at the time.
Yep.
Gerry?
Well, Peter can point to specific examples that have a major impact on reducing risk. And we can point to 25 years of helping organizations to grow from not even thinking about security and privacy to now where they are. And it's not a perfect world, like I said before. So it's you know, it's a different level perhaps across different organizations, but certainly they've grown to understand governance and how important it is, and how important it is to budget properly for controls that reduce risk, and then also have the evidence. And we do have a software platform that captures all the evidence of due diligence. And so all of that, in general, across the board, has improved our clients, whatever degree it has. And some of it is, there are obstacles along the way that come into play. But, I'd say that we've had a lot of success in doing that. And, I'm happy every day that we're helping to help organizations to understand more about what they're dealing with. And very happy to be working with Sublimation Health, because I can't think of a worse scenario than what we've described already, and then having that solution in place and being able to talk about that as well with our clients. And so it's good.
So in all of this, we've talked a little bit about budget, we've talked a little bit about financial impact, but I want to kind of bring those two together. So when healthcare organizations experience their breach, their outage, a major system disruption, like you guys have been talking about, what's the real cost behind the financial impact?
But it's patient care, right?
Mm.
It's patient care. It's downtime. It's stress on the people that are in the hospital, whether they're there as a patient or as a worker. So and then there's long-term effects, right? You want to, like, the PTSD of it. Like,
Mm.
am I going to log in tomorrow and is it going to be okay? So like there's always that fear, You know, if you sit and think about anything you do in life that doesn't succeed, every time you go to do it again, there's always that thought in the back of your head, oh, what if this happens? You know, the person who gets up in a batter's box, they get hit by a pitch the last at bat, the next at bat, they're a little timid, you know? So like there's serious ramifications around things when they happen in hospitals. And, you know, it's everybody always says patience, and that's factual. And I don't discredit that. And it is, because we're in the business of saving lives, right? Save lives, not drives. That's our motto here, by the way. And yeah, but it's also the team that has to work through this, right? It's the amount of stress during an outage that a team has to go through. It's off the chart. And depending on the day, like and it sounds silly, but if it happens on a weekend,
Mm.
now you're not only dealing with the stress of the people that are calling you from the hospital, you're also dealing with the stress of everything going on at home. You know, so it's I know it
Right.
sounds silly, and it shouldn't come into play, and you and as a team member, you understand where your responsibility lies. You have to get that hospital back up and running, but you also, you know, there's other ramifications that come along with that. And having to manage everything is a stressful event, and it's
Mm.
stressful for the patients and the doctors and the clinicians and and it's just a bad thing from beginning to end. That's why, you know, we are constantly explaining cloud is up 99 and 11.9% of the time. It doesn't go down.
Mm.
Like, it just doesn't. It's always there. And you know, it's and then once again, it's about the ecosystem to make sure that you can support it. You know, so it's one thing to have your EHR in the cloud, but if one of your on premises apps goes down, then having your EHR up, if it's connected to that app, really doesn't help you much. So that's why it's a full ecosystem that we talk about.
Hmm.
Thanks for that, Peter. Gerry?
Yeah, so it's interesting that back in the beginning of the HIPAA days, the rules said if you have a breach in one state that involves more than 500 patients, 500, you're put on the wall of shame. It was called the Wall of Shame. It was an HHS website, Wall of Shame, and your name is on there with all the information about it. Okay. Now, and I would say the biggest incident back then would be laptops that were unencrypted that got lost, something like that, right? Um, and also employees that might be selling information or telling attorneys, you know, here's here's charts of accident victims, so you can go after them and try to get their business, stuff like that. Those were the big things back then. Now, what do we look at? We talked about 130 million in Change Healthcare, and also, you know, Peter's describing, you know, cybersecurity is patient safety and lives, and that is the motto also of HSCC, the Health Sector Cybersecurity Council. So that is seen as, you know, the biggest impact that can occur is impacting patient safety and lives. It's not 500 records in one state. You know what I mean? So now the HIPAA rule hasn't been updated, but it is going to be updated this year, HIPAA security. Sure, they're going to make some adjustments to that metric. So just overall, the landscape is what it is. And, you know, I really can't say more than what I just talked about in relation to how things have changed due to not only cyber attacks, but also natural disasters like fires and floods and hurricanes and who knows what else that can occur. If it's downtime, it's downtime. It doesn't really matter why. It's just downtime. And so that's my comment there. Okay.
All right. So, why can't healthcare organizations think only about their EHR when planning for resilience and recovery? Peter?
Yeah, so it's once again, we're back to the ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
And each part of that ecosystem supports a different part of the hospital. So if you're only focused on your EHR, that's great, but what about those other mission critical applications that are tied to it? Right? You can have the EHR up and running, but if everything else isn't there to support it, once again, the hand with the five fingers, right? If that's not all there, you're not going to support the patients, and you're going to increase the stress of the people that are inside that hospital. Now, I found out a long time ago, people can deal with singular events, and they'll persist and move on. But when it's a regular occurrence, then that's where they start to really feel it, and that's that's why we continue to push cloud. But if your pharmacy is down, but your EHR is up, I mean, how is that? You're not, people are in pain. People need their medicine. It's life-saving medicine. It's not, they're not, they're not there the way insurance companies are now. If you're in the hospital, you're sick. It's not like it was 30 years ago where you went to the hospital and they kept you for 2 days and then you got released. That's not the case anymore. So if you're there, you're sick. You need your images to be accessible. You need to make sure that when we put in information, it goes where it needs to go. It needs to be tied to you. It can't be a mistake and charts get mixed up, like that. That's not a pod. That would be horrific, So I think that's how it affects the most.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but
I'm a huge fan of planning. And so having that disaster recovery plan that Gerry's team works on, and then doing that testing all the time, make sure that the staff is, is drilled as
yeah.
much as busy as they are, those drills are necessary.
Mhm.
And that's where you guys come in, right, Gerry? This planning.
Yeah. Right. So, disaster recovery, but it's also DRBC, and the BC part is business continuity. And that part of it is every department or every location in an enterprise needs to assume they're down, assume they're down for whatever, and what other departments are you relying on? What systems are you relying on? How does it now occur in a manual way, right? Potentially. So that, to Peter's point, is that that in a sense opens it up to the fact that it is enterprise, and that um, workflows have to be understood. Like, what do we do under this situation? And write in writing, it's because the panic occurs enough at the time. If you don't have some kind of a documented playbook when it happens, the panic is probably multiplied by 100 because nobody knows what to do. So that has to be in place. We tell we consult with clients about, yeah, you have to do that. You have to assume the worst and come up with your BC plan, the business continuity plan. But also understand that, with companies like Sublimation Health, that control can make those plans less needed to some degree, right? Because if you're almost immediately back up, then that playbook doesn't need to be gone through. Now you still need to recover from on premise. Maybe you have to do that, but it's like flipping a switch to get to the cloud, continue as normal. And I don't mean to simplify this too much, but and then to go back to the on premise when it's restored. But the pressure, imagine the pressure that's off when you can restore on premise without being down. You're still up. So that's why it all comes together. The playbook is important to reduce panic, and assume the worst. And then the control from Sublimation Health is really, something that should be considered, so that all that risk kind of becomes fixed right away.
Peter, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I thought that was a great answer.
All right. Oh, I saw you shaking your head, so I figured that was okay. So let's talk about misconceptions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that organizations have about being prepared for a cyber event or major outages?
In my opinion, from what I've seen, some of the biggest misconceptions is what they actually own and how it actually works. So it's a lot of, yeah, we have this, yeah, we have that, but the pressure test on the system hasn't been completed yet because they think that they have this. And so I always ask, And I always tell people, please don't answer it. I said, just think about it before our next meeting. If holy cow happens, what do you actually look like inside your environment? Like, go home and think about that. And you a lot of it is muscle memory, right? So when we test systems, when I talk to hospital leadership, I try and get them to test systems as often as possible, because no matter what happens inside the hospital, when you can have a great environment, but if you don't test it on a regular basis to continuously know what to do, then your chances of success diminish a little bit. It's muscle memory that everybody needs to know where to go and what to do. So I'll continuously say we should test monthly, like for IRE as an example. It takes 10 minutes to get it up. Have everybody log in every day, like that we set it up for you to log in. It's muscle memory, so that God forbid the event happens. Okay, great. I know what to do because I've been doing it for a year. This is going to be just like another test, but it's going to be real, so it's in my opinion, pressure testing the system, thinking you have something that you don't, and then the execution, because during the initial everybody's nervous, because it's oh my god, not everybody's 100% prepared for holy cow, we have a serious issue, right? You'd like to think they are, but if it's the first time you're pressure testing, they're probably not going to react well, right? Because you're going to have people going in different directions, thinking different people have responsibilities that they may not actually have.
Yeah.
Misconceptions, Gerry. I know you got a story.
Well, I think that the biggest misconception that has been erased, hopefully, is that we're too small. We're not going to get hit. We're under the radar. And they're going after the big guys with the big money. They're not going to hit. They're not going to come after us. The problem is, like, Change Healthcare didn't distinguish between small, medium, and large. It hit everybody that was connected to them for claims processing. And small pharmacies went out of business. Big impacts, no matter what size. So the big, we haven't said it yet today. I'm surprised we haven't said it, but it's not a matter of if, it's when. That applies to everybody. And I think that awareness happened because of Change Healthcare. And I think that a lot of companies like ours and like Peter's have really emphasized that concept, that don't think that you can't become part of an impact, because you can. So I think that is the example I can bring today about that kind of a subject matter in the healthcare industry. Just think of a one doctor practice. You go in there and you start talking about cybersecurity. Oh, it's a big deal. We're not going to get hit. Look at where we are. We're in rural healthcare in some state, rural, and there's no attackers going to be thinking about us, but they could be connected to a health system or whatever. So that's where we are today. The other part I want to say is that the insider thing, which used to be big, one of the biggest things in the old days, it's still big, obviously, because of phishing attacks. So it's kind of gone around in a loop of being big back then. Then it kind of got minimized to some degree, and now, because of the ability of AI bringing some phishing to be more realistic, that more tempting to click on is a big threat. So that part of it too, and I think everybody's aware of that part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So looking ahead, guys, what should healthcare leaders be doing today so that they can better prepare for the next wave of challenges?
So I think that they have to start with a fair assessment and a deep look in the mirror on how that they can help their environment to withstand something like that, and have the disaster recovery, business continuity plan in place to roll out should that happen. So if that happens, how, what step one look like? So I think that, like we got to map out our environment. What are the critical dependencies for the EHR, right? So your EHR runs, but what does the EHR need to be supported so that it could run effectively, right? It's not just about being up and running. It can be up and running, but if it can't be effective, that's the problem. And I don't know that every hospital has a good map of dependencies for internal systems that they actually understand. And not a knock, I'm not saying that. You just asked a question, I'm trying to answer it, right? I think that, the more you talk to hospitals, because they just don't know what every application is intertwined with that it supports. And I think that I mean, if I had to say, step one was you have to do an evaluation, like with anything, right? Like you're just something as simple as going on a trip for vacation. You don't just say, I'm going away tomorrow and get in a car. You map it out. You see where you're going. You try and see the bathroom stops along the way. Like, where am I going to eat? All that great stuff. Well, you have to take that same approach inside your environment. You have to know what's affected each step of the way, and then how do you counteract that, and to be prepared should an event like that happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think we talked about one of the biggest constraints, or one of the hardest things to do, and that is the third-party vendor vetting, and that is what I believe is the top two vulnerabilities that could bring down a system or any provider. But think of a health system that has, let's say 500 vendors, right? That they consider to be business associates, which are third-party vendors that either access, store, or transmit their PHI, and also could be impacting medical devices or whatever. So they're inherently high risk. So how do you know what their residual risk is? Their controls and what's left. So you have to vet them, and you vet them on onboarding, contract time, and that's the time when they really answer the questions, right before the contract, and also periodically. And those questions could amount between cyber and AI, which is now also part of that vendor risk because they're providing apps with the AI enabling in it, right? So that becomes the vetting. It could be 100 questions. You have 300, 400, 500. Let's just take 500 times 100. What does that come to in answers if you do a full boat? 50,000 answers. Who has the time in a hospital health system to look and look at 50,000 answers where the vendor is supposed to be providing documented evidence, policies, procedures, and anything else. Some reports that are standard, like what's called a SOC 2 about a vendor, especially if they have a data if they're hosting or whatever. Nobody. So it could be an exercise where they're sending the questions out, getting the answers back, and not even looking at them because they just don't have time. That's how dramatic that can be, and how the results of that could be unknown, even though they did the exercise. And the reason why they're doing the exercise is because if they don't do it, they're not compliant with vendor vetting, and they could be penalized in an event of a breach caused by a vendor if the government sees that they don't have a program in place. So, what do you do? We're going to be introducing, I'll just put a little plug here for us, is that we're introducing AI into that process of being able to look at the question, the link to the rule, where it's related to, like in HIPAA or NIST, cybersecurity, whatever rule, the answers, the documentation that's provided as proof, analyzing all of that as 80% of the process, having a suggested risk rating on every answer, which trends up to overall risk rating on a vendor, and eliminates 80% of all of that so that the remainder is left for somebody to say, yes, I accept that risk. Okay. And they may go through X number of questions of answers from one vendor and see that, this is hitting exactly where I would be, I'm just going to accept it all. Now imagine the difference in impact. And, they're not going to do all 500 at once anyway. They're going to do maybe 50, but even still, the time it takes and to actually understand and have reports that show this is where you are with this vendor right now, and this is their action plan of the vendor to what they have to do. It's just going to, be amazing help. And so we're looking forward to it, almost ready to release that to our clients. So we're looking forward to that.
I I love that you guys are looking to the future to help everyone who may or may not be stuck in the past,
Hmm.
and understanding that, you know, compliance, security, cybersecurity, all of the things isn't these things are not in place just to check boxes. And
Right.
that is that is how I think a lot of people see it. They're like, this is something I have to do, not something that I'm doing because of patient care or whatever. It's something that I have to do. And so
Hmm.
if you guys are out there educating people in health systems and boards and all of the powers that be, that this is more than just a check boxes situation.
Oh
And
yeah.
we all know that until you lose it, you don't really you take advantage, right? It's until you don't have it, you don't know that it's there, right? Because
Hmm.
you're doing your job, you're checking the boxes and you're, clicking away on the computer. And as soon as that disappears, that is when you find out all of those systems and all of those softwares and all of those things that you were like, I didn't realize that these things were the fingers of my hand, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so trying to prevent that for health systems when the oh crap moment happens, right, is really the mission that you guys have taken on. And I'm glad that you guys are together doing this,
Thank you.
providing two critical systems so that the checked boxes can be easier for people and can help a lot in those oh crap moments when people are prepared. And I am a huge proponent of drills. We always did fire drills and hurricane drills and tornado drills, depending on where you are in
Hmm.
the country. And this is just another one of those drills that
Yeah.
to happen so that when it does happen, everybody is more prepared so that it doesn't go from 0 to 100. It's more like from 60 to 80.
And
Right?
the drills have to be realistic in that I'll say that I went to Catholic school and we had these drills that were at the time, way back in the day, when a bomb hits. So we did bomb drills, and that we had to go under our desk.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna help, right?
and
Yeah.
and not everything has to be done all at the same time,
Yeah.
right? It's a question of strategic testing. You don't have to just blow up the system every month to see how you're going to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can get just as much out of testing parts of the system as you move through the process, so that when, God forbid, anything happens, that part has been pressure tested a couple of times as well, right? It's always great to do a full test. I'm not saying that, but it's also great um, to improve the response time in other areas of the business as well.
Hmm.
You don't always have to blow everything up at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm an avid cruiser. And so when I go on cruises, at least one port of every cruise, there's some sort of drill or test that is happening.
Right.
They come over the loudspeaker and they're like, this is just a test. Don't worry about the alarms. It's not real. And I can see that the hospital administrators and the folks that are, going to have to do this, I can just hear that coming over the loudspeaker at the hospital. This is just a test of our emergency broadcast system.
Yeah.
And something happening so that everybody's ready for when it does happen. Guys,
Hmm.
thank you so much for doing this panel today. I'm excited that we're going to be able to get this out so more people can start thinking about avoiding what will, if could, all the things in the future. Um, Peter, why don't you tell us what's the first step with you? How do they get a hold of you? And what's the first question you're going to ask when they get on the phone with you?
Yeah, so you could always reach us at www.sublimationhealth.com, right? And go on our website, and we have contact forms on there. I mean, I take cell phone calls, 201-723-8822. Call me
Hmm.
anytime, and I probably the first question I always try and ask people is, what's your pain point, right? What can I help you with? I if in order to to get down my list of things, I need to know where you're at, right? So what's keeping you up at night? What are you worried about? What's the goal for the future? It's what's your infrastructure look like? But it's my biggest thing is, how can I help you? I need to find out what's keeping you up at night in order for me to deliver the best solution to what's actually keeping you up at night, right?
Mm.
And it's always around patient care, because everybody in this industry really, like, it used to be like a thing people would say, whatever industry they're in, it would be like the typical nice thing to say. But it's amazing how many people I come across that genuinely care about the people that they don't even know. So it's nice to sit back at the end of the day and be able to say you help people.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you. And Gerry, where do we find you? And what's the
Okay.
first question you ask?
Okay. So www.complyassistant.com. 73, as long as we're giving out numbers, 732-539-5827. 24 hours a day. Not my cell phone, the website. But like Peter says, the main thing is to there's nothing worse than somebody calling you up, or you're reaching somebody and they just start to talk. They don't know anything about what your pain point is. They know nothing about your organization. They just start talking, right? And it might not be anything you want to hear. So how do you know where to really focus on? It's exactly what Peter said, and we have a good uh, a good I would call friend and comrade is Mr. Tony Ferrante, who is Peter and I are both always in touch with, and his motto is God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So the 2 ears are to understand the problem, to listen to it, and then to focus on how can we help them with that problem. And if we don't do that, we don't know if we're hitting the mark on helping organizations, because we're not really making the point to how we can help them. And so that's very important. But thanks, Brooke, for doing this. You're an excellent moderator. You asked the tough questions and the good questions. And it sounds like Peter and I did okay answering them. So, all good.
I want to thank you guys for the opportunity. Um, it was interesting. First one I've done. Looking forward to another one.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time and your guidance through this process. So,
And
thanks,
just one
guys.
more thing, Brooke. I do want to do another shout out to HSDC, because it's a great organization. If someone listening is not volunteering for them, reach out to them. The director is Greg Garcia for HSCC. They always will welcome a volunteer, because there's a lot of work to do there. If you want to go to see their resources that they provide, they're at hscc.org. And they have a wealth of knowledge on there, and tools and things to look at and learn. And to belong to that is really a great thing. So I would encourage folks to reach out. Of course, Greg doesn't want to get like 1,000 emails in one day, but he's going to welcome volunteers.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, guys, for being here today. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you very much.